Okay, Shivika, hi, can you hear me? What's your question?
Yeah, I've been holding Tata Motors recently acquired shares, 189 at 525.5.
Okay.
I wanted to know the scope. It's doing well right now, but the results are not so good, and I wanted to know in from the long-term perspective.
Okay, then Funny is the right person to actually answer your query. Funny, what did you think of the Tata Motors number, and barring the strong JLR performance, what's your take on this? And for the long term, can someone remain invested?
Well, Sumera, Tata Motors is all about JLR, right? So there isn't anything in Tata Motors except JLR as we speak, because standalone, we all know that Indian operations are not really great, not because the company has any inferior products, but because the economic environment is not really conducive. So you do expect that things will improve there over a period of around 1 to 1.5 years. But till then, I think JLR is all fun and games. Things are happening there at a fast pace. And the volume growth disappointment or subdued volume growth in JLR was more due to production constraints and not so much about demand. New models are getting launched out there. Performance from emerging geographies continues to be good. So, the script is wonderful out there. And if you consider the valuations, again, not very expensive, it's fairly valued. Again, comparing Tata Motors to what its historical median valuations were is not really fair, because historically it was all about an Indian business. So I think considering all these factors, if the investor has a longer term horizon, she can continue to stay on. I think she can look at targets of closer to 650 rupees in 6 to 9 months' time.
All right, then maybe better targets are coming on that particular counter. And as we speak, the stock is moving towards the high point of the day. And the Nifty, if we can pull it up fast enough, in fact, the Nifty has moved into the green. It's holding with a gain of around a couple of points. Couple of big movers with the ITC as well as Reliance Industries. Both those two big boys have moved. And maybe if you pull up an Infosys as well, because there should be some of these big boys that are moving around. And that's what's really led to that fight back. Even Reliance Industries is currently at the high point of the day. So that pullback can definitely be attributed to these three stocks: Infosys, ITC, as well as Reliance Industries. But let's go to our next caller. In fact, it's an SMS that we have received. Rima writes to us from New Delhi, and she has a query on Jaiprakash Power. She wants to know if it's the right time to invest in JP Power. All right, that's going to be quite interesting. Vishal, what do you think? Is there any right time to invest in JP Power? What's your take?
JP Power has a strong decline from around 25 to almost half to 12 rupees. In the last 1 or 2 months, it's been consolidating in that range, and we have seen some build up on volume as well as momentum. It can be a medium term buy with a stop loss of 12 rupees for a target of around 18 to 20 rupees in the medium term.
Funny, what's your take? You went through the details of the deal with the JSW.
Well, relieved that the deal has finally happened. So I think, considering the history of this deal, I think valuations will be secondary, although they are not bad. But from a seller's perspective, could have been always better. But considering the dire straits that JP Power finds itself in, I think any money is good for it. Coming to fundamentals of JP Power, after this deal, it will only be left with the Nigri plant, which is in different phases of commissioning. So for it to stabilize, it will take around 1.5 years. It will be the primary driver of profits and ROE for this company. That is the residual JP Power after the sale of Karcham, which is hugely profitable. So the second quarter results are not very relevant to extrapolate JP Power's numbers going forward. I think going forward, you can expect ROE to limp back to around 8 to 10% levels. Valuations are not very expensive, but at the end of the day, it is more of a turnaround story. So there is a significant amount of risk that the investor will take. But if the company is successfully able to generate that kind of ROE and Nigri is stabilized, then I think you can look at levels closer to 18 to 20 in about 1 year's time. But let me, reiterate that there is a considerable amount of risk, because if, since this is in the phase of commissioning, if, things get delayed, then the stock can also see a downward trend.
Let's go across to our next query. Mr. Joshi calls us from Kolkata, and he has a query on SBI. Hi, Mr. Joshi.
नमस्कार सर जी, गुड आफ्टरनून सर.
गुड आफ्टरनून मिस्टर जोशी, आपका सवाल क्या है?
सर जी, मैं बोल रहा हूँ कि अगर मेरे को SBI में अभी मतलब कि और इन्वेस्ट डालना है तो अभी डालूं कि या कुछ दूसरे स्टॉक में डालूं?
सर, आपके पास ये शेयर्स हैं?
हाँ जी, है अभी.
क्वांटिटी
500 है सर जी.
500 शेयर्स. और आपका बाय प्राइस?
बाई है 2560 रुपए में.
Alright. और सर आप लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टर है कि शॉर्ट टर्म इन्वेस्टर?
जी लॉन्ग टर्म.
Long term investor. All right. Let's go across to our experts then. Vishal, let me come to you. What's your take on this? He's holding 500 shares. He's sitting on a bit of a profit. What should he do? And should he buy some more? He's asking.
Actually, State Bank has been underperforming in the last rally what we see in the banking stocks, but now in the last couple of weeks it has caught up and it has broken that resistance of 2800 after almost 3 to 4 months, and I see that now the resistance next directly comes around 3200 to 3300. So definitely a good stock even for long term as well as medium term, and he can even add right now because we have another 3 to 400 rupees on the upside in the short term.
Fani, what's your take? Today we've seen a lot of upgrades come in for SBI. In fact, the target that JP Morgan now has on this stock is 3,400. Would you concur that there's this kind of upside in the stock?
Well, there is some upside, but it's difficult to quantify it in percentage terms for the simple reason that SBI being a proxy to Indian economy will directly depend on the pace and the quantum of economic turnaround. As far as the results are concerned, it was an outlier as far as PSU banks are concerned, because the asset quality compared to its other PSU peers has been reasonably stable and it's been improving. Even restructured assets have improved sequentially. That is something that we have not seen in other large PSU banks. The only area that now has to work in SBI's favor is advances growth, which will directly depend on the pace and the economic and the quantum of economic turnaround. Since the investor already has an exposure to SBI, I would suggest that he take exposure in a private bank, maybe the second largest bank of the country, ICICI Bank, in which case he will have a well diversified portfolio of PSU banks as well as private banks.
All right, then a couple of options as well, Funny's brought in there for you. But with regard to SBI, just a point I want to point out is that in fact the stock is somewhere at around 2,900, and before this rally we've seen over the past couple of days it was hovering around the 2,500 mark. So in May, when in fact the elections were held, at that time as well it was at around 2,500, and that time the Nifty was at 7,200. So the Nifty moved a good 1,000 points, but in fact SBI didn't move anywhere, and that's why in fact we're seeing a bit of a catch up on that stock as well. You pull up a wider time, in fact, time horizon, you'll see the stock was at around 2,500 back in May, and then in fact it didn't move anywhere in spite of the Nifty moving a good 1,000 points. But our next caller is already standing by. So Pankaj calls us from Assam, and he has some investments in ONGC. Hi Pankaj.
Hi.
How can we help you?
मैंने ONGC का शेयर लिया था.
Okay.
395 भाव में लिया था 100 शेयर. अभी क्या करूं मैं समझ में नहीं आ रहा है. वो मैं 6 महीने रुक सकता हूं.
Alright.
ओके, हमको थोड़ा बताइए के बारे में.
Sure, Sarji. Alright, let me come across to you, Funny. As an investor, he's quite clear. He wants to hold it for around 6 months. He's bought it absolutely break even currently. Should he hang in there?
He should. The overall sentiment is positive. However, challenges do abound for ONGC in the form of lower gas prices than expected by market, higher subsidy than that expected by the market, and since crude prices are expected to be lower going forward, at least for the next 6 months, then I guess even realizations will be lower. But on the other hand, compared to where it was, the subsidy is quite low. Market was expecting complete elimination, but it's a little higher than what market's expectation is. So all in all, it seems a reasonably okay bet. I would advise not to add more, but he can hold on, and maybe on a good rally over the next 6 months he can exit, because the impending divestment will also be a considerable overhang on where ONGC goes, both in the near to medium term.